man, the icon, Sting, making his return. I want to know how you guys feel about it. I want to know what your predictions are. I want to know, anything that you want to shoot from the hip about Sting returning to wrestling at 60 years. Well, I think it might be 61 now, actually.
61.
61 years old, and after a serious neck injury and spinal injury, 4 years after it happened. Shoot, Gary, you first. You're the AEW expert in this trio.
All expert wrestler. Expert wrestling fan. Damn it.
Well, where do I start? You know me, Mark, right? Probably the only person in the world that can rival you as a Sting fan.
Mm-hmm.
Genuinely, to me, he's up there with Ric Flair, one of the best of all time. Be all, end all. I'm always going to mark out for whenever I see Sting. Him turning up in AEW last week, I haven't had that feeling from a wrestling show in years.
Yeah.
Same. And that either tells you, right, that there's something wrong with the current product as a whole, or it tells you that he's the biggest star that there could be to me or to someone else, or just given the buzz. I'm guessing it's a mixture of both. But when it comes down to the debut itself, what you notice, it's all about generations, isn't it? He walks out, comes down the ring after the fantastic sort of snowy video package with the snow in the arena and everything, and the atmosphere and the fans going mental. Which, in all fairness, I've got to say something. The camera shots that you got from all of that was spot on. It wasn't like AJ Styles debuting in the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
And you're just getting a focus on Roman Reigns' face.
Yeah.
Right? It was nothing like that. They focused on Sting the entire time. And I've got to appreciate that. And then went back to the fans after a break. And I think that structure worked out really well. In terms of going from Sting to Arn Anderson, which is most storied rivalry, apart from Ric Flair, you can see, onto the Rhodes brothers, and then over to Darby Allin, who I actually think they've been pushing as somewhat of a mysterious character in the way that the Crow Sting first revealed himself.
Yeah.
But what I've not actually heard anyone mention is the way that Sting looked at Darby Allin as he went from the non-painted side of his face and didn't really care, and then got more intrigued as he looked at the painted side of his face, right? And as that's happening, you've got the little upstart Darby Allin, who's like 5'6" tall or whatever he is, right? Looking up to Sting like the petulant teenager looking at his dad trying to square up to him.
Yeah.
As if he's done something wrong and he's going to knock him out or something. With Sting, I don't want to see him wrestling a one-on-one match. I think to myself, he's too broken down and old, and I don't want to have like past memories of Sting sort of tainted by him not being able to be as good as he once was.
Yes, I agree.
So tag matches, yeah, fair enough. Let him do a couple of stinger splashes and whatever he can do. Baseball bat shots, usual sort of stuff. Cinematic matches, I mean, they're big in 2020, aren't they? So anything along them lines, I'm fine with. But just don't be putting him under pressure to take bumps and stuff. Which, in all fairness, I've heard some reports that say that he's not going to be taking like bumps or risks or anything like that. So no more buckle bombs for the Stinger.
No, well, that's good. Right. Just to elaborate on what you've just said there, obviously Dave Meltzer, who I've already besmirched once already in this broadcast, has put out his newsletter, which says that they've said that Sting isn't going to be taking any bumps, but he is going to be a prominent character in AEW, which was something that Vince didn't want Sting to be in the WWE. Also, in the same article, apparently Sting wanted the cinematic match with The Undertaker, but apparently it didn't tickle Vince's bollocks, so it never happened. That's just
There's
to
money
elaborate
left on the table right there, isn't it?
How you can pass that, I don't understand it. The dream matches were always Goldberg versus Steve Austin, Sting versus The Undertaker. I'm sorry, but you you're a fucking idiot. You had both of them on the roster. You could have done something. Sting did a graveyard match back in 2000. The WWE likes to say, "Oh yeah, we've done this and it's fantastic," and they did a fucking brilliant job of it. It was really, really good. They can't claim to have the first one because I believe the first one happened in 2000 and it was Sting and Vampiro. So Sting's quite well versed in graveyard matches. He knows what to do. They could have done it. They chose not to. And once again, it's, rimming the arsehole of a fan that would have paid through. I'd have paid the full WrestleMania admission to fly over the front row. All three of us would have been in front row, marking out like fucking schoolgirls to see The Undertaker versus Sting, even if it was filmed and we didn't get to actually see them live. I don't care. I'd have gone. I'd have flown. I'd have hitchhiked to WrestleMania to see that.
And I mean, it's not like it couldn't have been done safely either. So there's no reason why they couldn't have done that. You don't. You look at the cinematic match between Undertaker and AJ Styles. There were a couple of bumps that AJ took, but with what they were doing in that match, they could have made it look like a fight, like they did, make it look like a fight.
Yep.
And if there was any bumps that needed to be taken, you could have easily done a stunt person. You could have hired a stunt person to do that for him.
Yeah.
In terms of Sting being put in a grave and being buried, just somebody with that is the same frame, similar hair, face paint, shot from a different angle, seeing him falling. No one would know the difference. And if it came out afterwards that it was a stunt person, no one's going to be like, well, that sucks. They're going to be like, no, I mean, well, that makes sense because Sting can't fucking wrestle.
Yeah.
He won't be able to take a bump.
It can't be Darby Allin, can it?
No, it's too short.
No, yeah. But I wonder what Jeff Farmer's doing these days. He might have been in for it. I don't know. I mean, it could have been done, and the fact that Vince, it doesn't appeal to me. Yeah, fucking get out. Just get out of the company if it doesn't appeal to you. Just fucking sell, honestly, because you don't belong in the wrestling business anymore. If that does not float your boat, you do not belong in that business.
I can tell you exactly what the problem is with Vince. Why I didn't see that is because Sting was WCW's biggest star. Arguably, the biggest star they made.
Yeah.
Some people say DDP, but Sting was a guy that, he was a bit of a journeyman, like Ric Flair was before WCW. However, it's like he went to WCW and had a whole rebrand of his character. He did the Surfer Sting for a few years, and then he got rebranded into the character that he's most known for today. And Vince can't handle that. It's not a star he made. Yep. It was a star his rival made, and he can't make that guy look good no matter what. There was absolutely no way he was going to be defeating Triple H at WrestleMania in hindsight. There was absolutely no way we were going to do that because not only is that a star that Vince McMahon made, it's also his son-in-law. So, no, weren't going to happen. Let Sting have that big match, this big WrestleMania match, and that's it. Sting going up against The Undertaker, whether it win or lose, even if it made Vince McMahon a shitload of money, he would not like to admit that the top guy from WCW made him a shitload of money. It's simple as that.
I agree.
He can't get out of his own ego.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's always been WCW versus WWF at the time, right? To Vince McMahon. He's still in it now. You could tell that when he was doing the whole WrestleMania build-up for that Triple H match and how it switched from being about like vengeance and justice and all this sort of like random sort of pile of good stuff, right? And then all of a sudden, it's about WCW and the last stand and all this sort of stuff. As soon as they started going on about that, you knew fine well what was going to happen.
And then it devolved into DX versus the NWO. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I know for nostalgia, it was like great to see that, but that was not the match that was billed. It was billed as Sting versus Triple H, not fucking OAP DX versus the hell better looking NWO at the time. Because let's face it, if you put in the same arena Triple H, and Kevin Nash, you go, yeah, they're both looking great. You could still say the same about Billy Gunn, but fucking Raw Dog and X Pac, just
yeah, it was a weird one. It was a weird one. So how do you feel about 61-year-old Sting coming back to wrestling?
Well, I'm all for it. I'm not like Gary. I do not want to see him wrestling. I don't mean just like one-on-one. I mean in tag matches or anything like that where they can get around his frailties. I don't want to see him wrestling because anytime he gets in the ring, it can only take one slight bump and it could paralyze him or kill him. You never know. We don't know the extent of his health to really determine that. All we do know is that he wasn't retired by a WWE doctor. He was retired from a doctor outside the WWE who basically said that he was lucky that he didn't leave the arena in a wheelchair. Very lucky. That's how bad he was. And I'm not blaming Seth Rollins for it. I mean, even Sting said it weren't Seth Rollins' fault.
Yeah.
It were him that took the bump wrong because he didn't know how to take it. He asked how to take it. He was told how to take it, and he just didn't take it right. And it's also a case of, it was in his mid-50s and he was beaten down, and any slight impact like that, it's going to harm him a lot more. Wrestlers from back then aren't as well conditioned as a wrestler at the same age these days.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Wrestlers these days look after the body a lot better. They know a lot more about the body. They're not taking headshots and ridiculous bumps for the sake of taking ridiculous bumps week in, week out, with the exception of people like fucking Young Bucks who will do that for any money, really, any week. That's not a shot at Young Bucks, it's just who they are, But that's it, He was retired by a doctor outside the WWE. If he were retired by a doctor inside the WWE, I'd question it, I'd question it because I question it because of Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan was retired by a WWE doctor when a doctor outside the WWE said that there's nothing fucking wrong with you. That's what he was told for years. There's nothing wrong with you. You had a concussion and you had a few spasms. That was it. It's not a long-term injury. It was just WWE fearing that if they let him back in the ring, something would happen that would cause permanent damage. It was just a worry. That was it.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, he was retired by a doctor outside WWE. He can't be in the ring. Now, if he was to do a cinematic match, I'll be all for it because for aforementioned reasons, you can get around it, you can make it look good, and I'm happy. Other than that, excuse me, I don't want to see him on TV week to week. I don't want to see him as a manager. I don't want to see him as a general manager. Even though that's not AEW's MO, they don't do authority figures, which is one thing I actually really, really like about AEW, is that they've thrown that completely out the window. I don't want to see him as a figure on TV week in, week out. Because the reason why is because I think if you're doing that with someone that can't wrestle, you're ruining his mystique. That entrance alone re-established a lot of long lost mystique. It made him look above everybody else in that arena, on that roster. He was the icon again. He was the icon again. And that is one thing that I absolutely fucking loved about that segment. For me, if you want to make the most of that Sting character, you do what WCW was most successful with him with, is having him being the guy that's watching from afar who will only come down when he seriously has to.
Yeah.
When the good guys are on the back foot, they have no way. There's no way of survival, and he comes in, and he scares the hell out of the enemies. That's all you need to do. He could swing the bat a few times. He doesn't have to take bumps. He doesn't, he just has to be the person that saves the day. And in an instance where he doesn't save the day, there could be valid reasons why he didn't save the day, and he could change allegiances. You don't have to have him as an on-screen character every single week. There's things you can do with that character that protects him and protects the character as well. And that's all I want to see out of this. And I know a lot of people are going on about well, AEW can't get away from WCW, like TNA couldn't get away from WCW. They can't get away from the nostalgia. They're no better than WWE. And I'm like, the way I see it is AEW have to rely on nostalgia a little bit. The reason why they have to is because they are still a company that's in its infancy. And Joey Janela isn't going to appeal to the casual fan. Sting will. DDP will. Arn Anderson will. You hear those names, you'll be like, "Oh, they're up to something. I'll tune into that product." Even John Moxley isn't going to appeal to the casual fan. But if you want to get those long lost fans to come in, you've got to sprinkle a bit of nostalgia. And it's nowhere near the same as WWE either, because they use nostalgia correctly. They're not being used as people that will bury the current roster. They're not looked upon like that. They're looked as people that will add fans to the current roster. Whereas WWE, they use, and I'm not even saying they use it to bury the roster. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that they use nostalgia as a reason to sell out all seater stadiums that they will not be able to sell out otherwise. You do not get over unless Vince McMahon gets you over, and it just doesn't work.
No, I just find it bizarre because obviously in the 90s, individuals were getting themselves over. Steve Austin, prime example. He all right, yeah, him going up against the big boss man, not the big boss man, but Vince helped him. But the whole, his promos, they weren't even scripted, were they? For the most part, they weren't scripted. He came up with things by himself. He got himself over.
He told Vince McMahon in a parking lot, because he's repeated this story ad nauseum on his podcast. Even years after he stopped listening to his podcast, I can still say quote for quote what happened in that thing. He was just saying, like, Vince, I've heard that you've taken the mic away from me because when I go off script, it's popping the people in the production truck. He said, "Yeah, that's true." He goes, "Well, how can I get over if you're taking my natural self away from me? You're not taking my character, you're taking my personality away from me. If I'm popping the people in the production truck, then I can pop the fans. You need to let me be myself." And then said, "Okay, we'll do that." And that's basically the conversation. Not word for word, but pretty much close as.
Yeah.
And that was it. Vince McMahon relented and let him be himself. And then saw fucking money when he let him be himself. But it just doesn't do that anymore.
It's just incredible.
If you do, you have a ceiling. That ceiling is, you might end up with a WWE title, but it'll only be for a short period, and you'll probably get buried.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's scared to make stars that are bigger than WWE.
That's the problem.
And then have people leave him.
That's it. And now more than ever.
Because you think The Rock's done it, Cena's done it.
Yeah.
It's becoming a common thing.
Batista.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. It's becoming bigger than WWE and becoming big film stars. But it's even more so now because they can go to AEW. But the difference is that if a John Cena went to AEW, he's not going to be in the title matches week in, week out. No. He'll be there to enhance the talent that they're making, which is going back to the core point of this conversation, is that this is where Sting comes in. He's not there to bury the talent. He's not there to be above the talent. He may be in stature, but he's not there to make that the status quo. He's there to build that talent so that in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, if you need somebody to come in for that nostalgia pop, maybe that could be a Darby Allin. The fact is, you need these stars in your product, but you've got to use them right. You've got to use them right. You can't make stars without the stars gone by. It's simple as that. You just can't. You've got to have them there to help carry that person along a little bit, to get the fans watching in, more so now than ever when people just aren't viewing in the millions and millions like they used to.
Yeah.
You need those stars. So AEW do that right. So far, they've done that right. But so fuck, if WWE are going to do that, they're going to do that. Oh yeah, Goldberg's bigger than Bray Wyatt, or bigger than fucking whoever. We'll put the title on him.
So what we need here is we need the WWE to be reactionary like they were in 1997, 1998, 1999.
Exactly. And that would be more... And if the WWE fans and the AEW fans are going back and forth, bickering at it, yeah, it will still be silly, but at least we'll know that there's a reason why they're doing it. Because you can tell me that they've got a reason why now. They haven't. They just haven't. They just want to be superior to NXT. And it's like, or NXT fans want to be superior to AEW. It's like, broaden your horizons, guys. You know, it's, you know, NXT being bigger than AEW, it's just not happening because you're still part of WWE. You're still part of WWE, but it doesn't feel like WWE is bigger than AEW in the ratings. If NXT gets a better rating than AEW, it doesn't feel like it's WWE's accomplishment.
Yeah.
And AEW getting bigger than NXT, well, they're doing it fucking week in, week out, but it's nothing. You'd have to be bigger than Raw. You'd have to have better ratings than Raw.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. So reactionary, it isn't always a bad thing, but you've got to do it right.
Yeah.
And I think this is where NXT have done it so wrong because they didn't need to be reactionary at all. They had a compelling product on their own. And the moment they became reactionary to AEW is when their product started to falter.
So obviously you've told me the direction you don't want Sting to go in. What's the direction that you do want Sting to go in?
I mean, I've said what I feel like.
Let's give you the book. Let's say we're going to give you the book, right? Cody's going to come to you and he's going to say, right, I want one idea, and this is the idea that you want for Sting.
He's the equalizer. It's simple as that.
So is it just all the good guys, or is he going to have a faction of good guys?
He could have a faction of good guys. He could have a faction of bad guys. It can turn on a dime, like a heel turn that happens. Like he could turn character and be the red and black if you wanted him to be. All I want him to be is that character. I do not want him to be in the ring. Yeah. I don't want him on TV every week. He doesn't need to be on the mic every single week. He doesn't need to be managing people. He can endorse people, but he can't. If you go beyond his character, you make him, because he can't wrestle. If you're just going to make him a manager, it's character assassination.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like his character hasn't been assassinated already with his WWE run, is it? But he has got the opportunity to to clasp a little bit back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the one good thing he did in WWE, and I still love this, is when they were unveiling a statue of where Seth Rollins, and he was just there in the box. That was brilliant. That was absolutely fucking brilliant. And it also helped that Triple H fucking sold it like he always does. He comically sells, but he's believable when he sells like that.
The pop was incredible when that curtain went up. It's just insane. The crowd and people have the audacity to turn around and say, "Oh, he's just an old guy. Nobody fucking cares about him." But then you see that pop and you think, really?
Yeah, it was brilliant, and that was the one good thing they did with him.
Was well done.
But, before and after that, it was just, I mean, I were happy you got that opportunity, but it just wasn't what I wanted. And
Yeah.
and you know, I'm not stupid either. I mean, I still wanted Undertaker versus Sting, but I also was the person that would turn around to people and say, "Don't get your hopes up too much that it's going to be a 5-star classic, because this is what should have happened fucking years ago.
Yeah.
This is what should have happened. Vince McMahon should have just given Sting the money he wanted and say, look, you're gonna have your feud with the Undertaker. It's not just going to be the one match. You're going to have your feud, but it's not going to be every week or every month. It's going to be spread out. You know, it's old school and it works. You know, mid
Well,
50s Undertaker versus late 50s Sting, or sorry, early 50s Undertaker versus mid 50s Sting was not going to be the match we envisioned. But as far as a spectacle, it would have been like Undertaker. It would have been like Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. They didn't have to do much. They didn't have to do much at WrestleMania 18. They had the fans in the palm of their hands, and that's all you ever needed from Sting and the Undertaker. It's all you ever needed. Just don't expect a 5-star classic, because you're not going to get that.
yeah, I mean, everybody says that, you know, sometimes, well, in almost all cases, it's about the money. But the issue with that is, you know, I don't think there was a price in Sting's head. Obviously, all the interviews that I've ever read and ever heard have been, you know, look at every guy that came from WCW and what happened to them in the WWE, with
Yeah,
the
you had
exception of Booker T, who did get shit on, but then worked himself up again, you know, and earned, you know, multiple world titles and everything like that. He was worried about that. Obviously, Braun Panty's matches clashed with his Christian beliefs. You can throw money at him, but at the end of the day, it's about whether or not he doesn't need the money. But money is a factor. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. I mean, this AEW contract is going to be way more than he were earning at TNA, for example. It's just there were other factors, and it probably isn't as easy to persuade a person like that to come over and I mean, the only thing that probably would have persuaded him is the latter end of your argument. Say you're going to have that feud with The Undertaker. You're going to have that big blow-off match at WrestleMania. That probably would have persuaded him.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I always come back to with Sting is like why he didn't go back is because he said that he tuned into Raw, SmackDown, whichever it were, when Booker T was on there and The Rock came out and said, "Who the blue hell are you?" And he said that this is a guy that was a huge star in WCW, and The Rock's acting like he don't know who the fuck he is. Yeah. I don't want that treatment, you know, which is completely understandable. You don't undersell, hey, why did the invasion angle not work? It's shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Gary, do you want to chime in? Have you got anything to add to that?
No, in all fairness, we all know how principled that Sting is. And in all fairness, Vince McMahon has himself to blame for Sting being in AEW.
Yeah. 100%.
Guaranteed. Sting, from what reports have said, is only in AEW to give the fans the send-off that he wants to give to the fans. Yeah. That should have been his WrestleMania match.
Yep.
That should have been what could have been one run with the WWE title. It should have been that match with The Undertaker in a cinematic match. It should have been so many different things that just were never delivered to him quite in the way that I believe he was promised when he was negotiating the contract in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think so many broken promises over so much time proved him 10 years ago when he gave that interview to the TNA DVD that it was released on. When he gave that interview, he was proven right. And in his mind, he thought, now there's this other company I can go to. The fans seem to be behind it. I am behind it. I trust the TV company because I've worked for the TV company before. What's not to like about it? Right? And it's given him this opportunity to come in, regain some of the shine, as you say, right? And put an exclamation mark next to the end of his career. And I think that he feels like he needs to hand the torch off to someone.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I just have that feeling. He seems like the sort of person that wants to impart his knowledge onto other people. And he seems like backstage, he might end up being an Undertaker type for these kids that are coming through.
Yeah.
And that's only going to stand them in good stead for the next 10, 15, 20 years of their careers. And in particular, Darby Allin.
Yeah.
Just because that's the way that the company's positioned him at the minute with the whole rafters thing. And yeah, the mirror between the two at the minute, it seems to be there. And especially with the lingering between the two on the show.
Yeah.
But
and
genuinely, that's the way that the whole using Sting as like a backstage presence and knowledge base for everyone is pretty much the best way that you can possibly use him.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to what you're saying, it's like that's not you saying or us saying collectively that Darby Allin is the next Sting. It's more a case of it's very similar to The Undertaker and the original incarnation of Bray Wyatt. They're not, they have similar traits, but they're not the same. And it will be it will be wrong to try and push Darby Allin as Sting 2.0. They're not doing that. They're just seeing two people who have very similar characteristics, not as characters, not as characters, but more as the people. We're not looking at Darby Allin and Sting. We're looking at Steve Borden and whatever Darby Allin's real fucking name is, I don't know. But it's what it is it's just them two who have like similar philosophies on life and philosophies on their characters and shit like that. And Sting can carry him forward, not just on TV, but behind the stage. And that is where Sting is best positioned. And he can find those characteristics, those same philosophies with many people on that roster and help them get forward.
There's quite a lot to choose from, and they're all quite young. However, as posted by Chris Jericho today on his Instagram, there was a photo of him and Sting, and the wrestling world, or the internet wrestling world, is going crazy over the idea of Sting versus Chris Jericho in AEW. It's obviously a question I've got to ask, something that we really do need to touch on, even if it's just a little bit. Personal opinion is it should never happen.
Yeah,
I agree.
Complete agreement. Like for aforementioned reasons.
Yeah,
we don't want to see him in the ring. We don't want to risk him hurting himself and paralyzing himself, or even killing himself.
Is it fair for me to say that Chris Jericho basically has a free reign in AEW? So he can post anything that he wants on Twitter, and he can post any photo that he wants on Instagram, and there won't be any ramifications whatsoever.
Yeah, that's pretty much
absolutely.
it.
I mean, that's Chris Jericho's role, isn't it?
So Jericho is essentially just doing what he pleases here. Yeah,
he's famous for trolling the internet as well.
Yeah.
So the one thing that he's going to do at this point is go, "What do you want? Do you want Chris Jericho versus Sting?" And for a lot of people, that'll be a dream match, and it'd be fantastic to see. But it would have been fantastic to see if Sting was 100% healthy.
Yeah, and it generates buzz.
Yeah,
it generates buzz. It creates conversation, and if what wrestling fans need to do, they need to do their part in that. They've got to get out their own head a little bit. They've got to stop thinking that even though somebody posts something like that, doesn't mean that it is going to happen. It's just the purpose is to create a buzz. To create a buzz, that's simply it. We've got to be realistic about things. It's highly unlikely Sting is going to wrestle. Possibly not. It's very. I will even say, like 99.9% chance of him not wrestling. There's like that 0.1% chance of him wrestling. But I just do not see it happening.
I mean, could it not? Could it not have it? And again, we've mentioned it probably 20 times. Cinematic matches. Now we know that they can be done.
But cinematic isn't wrestling per se. It's not an in-ring. It's not an in-ring thing.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's a high level production.
Yeah.
If we are going to see Chris Jericho versus Sting, or the Painmaker versus the Icon, because that's what it's been established as. It's not Chris Jericho Sting. It's the Painmaker because of the makeup. If we are going to see that, it's going to be cinematic.
Yeah. Well, that basically answers my question. Really, none of us want to see it. we would have wanted to see it in 1996 before he became the Crow. I think that would have been pretty good. You know.
Oh yeah, that would have been brilliant.
Yeah, that would have been fantastic.
Unbelievable, but you know they're both getting on, and obviously we know that Sting can't do that sort of stuff anymore. So we're hopeful that we're intrigued. I think it's fair to say. I certainly am, and I'm the man that ejected out of wrestling years and years ago. Doing a little bit of nostalgia with the Nitrogen podcast, doing the old WCW and stuff. But this, I remember receiving, I think it was like 5 texts and 3 tweets or something like that the day that Sting came back. Went to the WWE, and it was more or less the same the other night when Sting came back to AEW. Corey, Gary, Brian. Oh no, Brian, you weren't watching it, were you? But I think Corey had tagged us both in a tweet.
Yeah, saying, I'd seen the footage on Instagram,
right?
On Twitter, sorry. That was it. That's where I found it.
A couple of other people that text me and everything like that, and obviously over here it was like 2:30 in the morning when it all kicked off, or whatever time it was. And luckily, I was sat at the computer. I was doing some of the podcast stuff, and obviously went straight onto the AEW Twitter and saw it. And you know, I dig the theme. I really really like the theme. Hearing Tony Schiavone just saying it's Sting, you know, harkening back to those to late 90s and the noughties, you know.
And then Jim Ross ruining it, but acting so unenthusiastic like, as usual.
Well, you know, I mean...
that's Jim Ross all over nowadays.
I was going to say, like, I'm not sure it's unenthusiasm. I think it's just... I think it's part of his ailment, to be honest. I think he sounds that way now because of his age and that sort of thing.
I've heard him get excited. He got excited when John Moxley turned up. He's still got it.
I didn't think you were going to say John Moxley then, to be honest.
Yeah,
I've heard him get excited when the cleaner comes around and he's taking photos of it.
Yeah. not Kenny Omega. Maybe from the back he might get confused.
Oh dear me.
But yeah, he does still have it. His ailment may affect him, but he still does have it. But I just don't think he's invested. I think he's just there to do a job. Yeah. You can tell when he's invested in the products. I don't think he is. He's surly in a lot of matches. Like there's certain things you can tell when, and this goes back to when he was in WWE. He's always been this way, where he would shit on matches with fucking code words. Like, you know, this is bowling shoe ugly. When he says that, you know that he's not enjoying it. You know, he's always been that way. And I think just over time, like, and particularly with the style that AEW is, it's not his thing. And he's just there because he can pass on some wisdom, some knowledge, and, you know, and that's basically his role there anyway. In general, that's part of his job, and fair fucks to him for it. But blooming hell, I mean, at least try to sound excited a little bit, you know, even if you're not, just try. It's fucking Sting, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of had to take over because I almost felt like Schiavone had got a little bit of a lump in his throat, and he'd got, you know, I think it had kind of hit him, even though he would probably, you know, he's obviously well smartened up to the fact it was going to happen and he was going to get that moment and everything. But I think I can hear him like choking up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, because obviously him and Sting, they have a very close relationship. He's always spoke about that. And Jim Ross might have had to take over a little bit because he couldn't get. I think he completely forgot that it was like 18 years since 19 years since the TNT broadcast, and that's when Ross had to sort of interject. But
I still find it weird that the fact that it's been so long they've been on TNT is like a way to big the stars up. I mean,
yeah,
I know you can't say WCW. You don't want to like risk rocking the boat. I get that, but them being on not being on TNT for 18 years, it is a little bit weird. But I don't think that's actually an AEW thing. I think that's a TNT thing. I think they're the ones that are telling them like, big the channel up a little bit.
It's to try and solidify that relationship between the company and the TV network, because
and
I think
it's just a bit odd.
I think it boils down to TNT have screwed wrestling over once already, and whoever is now in charge of, and obviously there is no AOL or anything like that now. TNT is now, everything's sort of separated again. Maybe TNT have told them to emphasize the fact that we are in this, and we don't. This isn't going to be WCW 2.0. We aren't going to pull the plug on you guys. At the drop of a hat, basically, which is what happened to WCW. So I think there is that reinforcement.
My only concern is Tony Khan a year ago said that we're not going to be the next WCW. We're not going to be WCW 2.0. Nothing's going to be WCW 2.0, guys. Before we touch on that, but yeah, he made that point. But whilst I am in support of him bringing in these legends, you got to remember these legends are highly associated with WCW as well. So you're already running that risk of people associating the two companies.
Yeah.
With banging on and on about X Star not being on TNT in 18 years, you're just further reestablishing that enforcement that you don't want. You want to try and keep distancing yourself away from that. But again, like you said, like I said, that's more of a TNT thing.
Yeah.
And, it's got to come to a point where we need to stop reinforcing that a little bit. If you want to make up for lost ground, then just keep putting on a compelling wrestling product. So all you need, keep showing that wrestling product. Keep giving them a little bit more time. Let them go over it now and then if need be. Give them the second show. That's how you reinforce it.
Yeah, shoulder programming is a big thing. I think.
Yeah. We've got the TNT title. You've got a title named after the network. We don't really need much more than that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I do think, though, that it's actually a conscious decision to try and capture some of them WCW fans.
I mean,
because everyone knows when Vince McMahon bought WCW, the WCW fans, on the whole, just disappeared. They're nowhere.
They went away.
They went away permanently. And I think by mentioning this whole TNT 18 years thing, without going into the whole legal ramifications of whether they can say WCW or not, they're trying to establish that sort of link. This is TNT wrestling, just like WCW was.
Yeah, recapture. But but
essentially,
it all harkens back to the nostalgia trip that I was saying before. There's got to be a time where you've got to cut that ties from that generation, and if you want to keep establishing yourselves as your own brand, that is not WCW, it's not TNA, it's not any other company, you've got to learn how to dial it back. And
I agree. It can be a bit much, especially like describing Sting as a TNT legend is a bit over the top.
Yes.
Because what else has he been on TNT?
What you on about? Shutter Speed was awesome.
What? That film that Joey Tribbiani was meant to be on that got shut off?
Was he meant to be in it as well?
No. In Friends, Joey was he went to Las Vegas to be in a film called Shutter Speed, but they didn't have the money to continue with it.
Oh, right. Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
I'm just adhering to the Friends fans here.
No,
Sorry.
that's you know, I must have watched. I know which episode you're on about, and I must have watched it probably 20 times, and I never picked up on it being Shutter Speed. That's
Yeah.
ace.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine Sting saying she's been dead for 20 years? She's
Good
been
Lord.
dead. Woo! Oh no, that's Ric Flair. Sorry.
That is Ric Flair. Yeah.
I always associate the woo with Sting as well. Like, it's a different kind of woo as well.
She's been dead for 20 years, but hey, it's showtime, folks.
Woo!